older story? What if his presence didn't begin on Earth at all? What if his first breath wasn't taken in Eden's soil, but in a realm existing before light touched the universe? The very thought cracks open a door that most traditions have kept shut for centuries. Yet Ethiopia's ancient manuscripts sit quietly, carrying secrets that dare to cross that threshold. And when you hear this possibility, something stirs inside you, not fear, but a strange familiarity. A sense that you've always felt incomplete, like a fragment of something bigger. A feeling that life started long before your birth certificate ever said it did. Modern life has a way of silencing that inner ache with noise, goals, endless distractions. But every now and then, the question slips through the cracks. Why do I feel lost? Why do I feel like I'm searching for something I can't name? Maybe the ache is older than you think. Maybe humanity's sense of disconnection is not a psychological glitch, but a memory buried under thousands of years of forgetting. A memory tied to the very origins of the first human spirit. Ethiopia's ancient writings do something bold. They pull back the curtain. They describe Adam not as a simple being formed in a garden, but as a soul created long before the physical earth was shaped. They speak of a record written in heaven, a blueprint of humanity drafted before dust existed. Imagine that for a moment. A story where human identity didn't begin with a breath in Eden, but with a purpose written before creation itself. These texts paint Adam as more than a figure of clay. They reveal a being whose story begins in a place untouched by time. A being who watched what was coming, who carried a destiny carved into his spirit long before rivers flowed or stars burned. Most people have never heard this version of the story because these ancient pages stayed hidden, protected by monks who guarded them with devotion, preserved in monasteries untouched by Western edits, untouched by political rewriting, untouched by the pressure to simplify the universe into neat, small boxes. These manuscripts weren't lost. They were shielded. Shielded from people who weren't ready to accept that the human story didn't start with soil, but with a divine calling scripted before matter appeared. That's why so many traditions skipped these details. They were too powerful, too expansive, too challenging to the usual timelines people were used to hearing. But think about it. If Adam had a story before Eden, then humanity has a story before Earth. And that explains so much. Why humans feel like strangers to their own world. Why we long for meaning that nothing here can satisfy. Why suffering feels like a detour instead of a destination. Deep down, most people feel like they've been dropped into a life they were never fully prepared for. Like they used to know something important but somehow forgot it along the way. Ethiopian writings echo that feeling. They suggest humanity was meant for something greater than the cycle of birth, struggle, and death. They describe a pre-creation realm where identity was designed, purpose was written, and destiny was shaped. If Adam's spirit existed before creation, then the story of humanity isn't about trying to become something. It's about remembering something. Remembering who you were before the world taught you who to be. And that idea changes everything. It flips the entire concept of purpose, faith, and human struggle upside down. It means you weren't created by accident. You weren't born without intention. You weren't placed in this world to wander without direction. If the blueprint existed before the universe, then your life has meaning woven into it from the beginning. Not a single moment of your existence is random. You're following a path written long before the sun lit up the sky. But why would such knowledge be hidden? Why would early scribes preserve this story while later traditions left it out? Because this version of the story gives humanity a sense of power, an ancient identity. It shifts the balance from humans being mere creations to humans being part of a divine plan that stretches beyond time. That kind of knowledge cannot be controlled. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be weaponized. So it was easier for later storytellers to keep Adam's story simple: a garden, a tree, a beginning. Yet Ethiopia's ancient manuscripts refused to shrink the truth. They held onto the fullness of the story, guarding it for a time when people were ready to ask harder questions. And that's the moment we're in now. More people than ever are searching for meaning, questioning everything, sensing that something important is missing. People feel the tension in their hearts, the gap between their daily lives and the spiritual depth they know must exist somewhere. When you hear that Adam's existence began before Earth, something inside you recognizes it, not as new information, but as something you always sensed but never had the words for. It's like remembering a dream you thought you'd forgotten. A feeling that this story is not just history, it's your story, your origin, your missing chapter. So as you sit with this mystery, let it open your imagination. Let it remind you that your spirit is older than your struggles, older than your pain, older than your confusion, older than everything this world has thrown at you. The story we're about to explore doesn't just explain Adam, it explains you. And once you see the beginning clearly, the rest of your life suddenly looks different. Before we continue deeper into this ancient journey, I want to say something directly to you. You're not just a viewer, you're someone special who shows up for knowledge that most people never explore. Your support helps me reach 10,000 subscribers, which allows me to keep bringing these hidden truths to light. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Tell me your name, your city, and the time you're watching this video. I read every comment. And if you want to support the channel further, you can do it through Super Thanks. I've also placed the links for the complete 88 books Ethiopian Bible and the Book of Enoch in the description below, so you can explore these forgotten texts for yourself. Ethiopia had secrets that went far beyond the pages of the Bible that we know today, long before the Western world knew about it. In the highlands, hidden by mountains and time itself, devoted monks did a holy duty that would keep knowledge alive. These men lived in monasteries on cliffs and in hidden valleys. They knew that what they were protecting wasn't just a bunch of words on parchment. It was a map to the spiritual and cosmic past of all of humanity. They put their lives on the line for manuscripts that most people thought were heretical or against the law. These texts were in danger when empires rose and fell and conquerors tried to force their own versions of faith on others. Fires, invasions, and the unending passage of time all threatened to wipe them out completely, but they survived thanks to the monks' unwavering devotion to their true worth. The Ethiopian canon had between 81 and 88 books, depending on which manuscript you looked at. It was bigger than the Western Bible. Ethiopia kept texts that talked about people and events that the rest of the world had forgotten, unlike the Western canon. 1 Enoch and Jubilees are two books that were very well known in early Christian and Jewish traditions. They lived on here long after they were lost in other places. Some texts talked about wars in space, angels coming down, and giants walking on Earth. Others gave us new information about creation, pre-human history, and the secret plans of the heavens. For hundreds of years, these manuscripts were more than holy. They were a record of a world that no one else could see, stories that linked people to their earliest spiritual roots. Think about what these monks do every day. They got up before the sun and chanted prayers that echoed off stone walls. Their days were mostly quiet. They worked hard on fragile scrolls and codices, copying every letter by hand, sometimes from texts that were already hundreds of years old. Every stroke of ink was a sign of devotion and an attempt to keep knowledge alive for future generations. But danger was always close by. Changes in politics, hostile leaders, or invaders could come at any time and destroy everything. Some monks hid with whole libraries on their backs or in secret cave systems. Their lives were simple, but their mission was very important: to keep truths that were too dangerous or too strange for the outside world alive. The fact that these texts have survived is amazing, not only because of the dedication of the people who wrote them, but also because of the historical strength they show. Monastic libraries burned down, and droughts, famines, and political unrest made monasteries easy targets. But the texts lived on, passed down from one group of monks to the next. Some were buried in secret rooms and found again hundreds of years later. Others were taken to faraway monasteries on cliffs that could only be reached by ladders or ropes. It was as if the geography itself was trying to keep these secrets safe from people who wanted to know them. Each manuscript, worn and fragile, has the echoes of many hands that traced its letters. These hands knew that erasing the letters would mean losing truths that are beyond human understanding. The way these manuscripts were treated also shows a deep spiritual side. Not only were they historical records, but they were also holy companions to the monks' prayers. Each page was filled with devotion, and each symbol had a meaning. During rituals, the texts were read out loud, whispered in private, or thought about alone. People thought that understanding them would connect the reader to God and to the very fabric of the universe, to things that happened before people were created as we know them. Adam was more than just the first man in these scripts. He was a person whose life and actions had an effect on places that people couldn't see, and whose story was connected to places that people couldn't see. Why did Ethiopia keep these stories when the rest of the world didn't? Maybe it was the highlands' geographic isolation, the dedication of monastic communities, or a unique view of faith that saw value in every whisper of divine history. No matter what the reason, the result is amazing: a living archive of the oldest biblical universe, quietly waiting to reveal its truths. This preservation goes against what most people think about history and faith today. It posits that a significant portion of what is regarded as canonical or universal in Western Christianity constitutes merely a fragment of a more extensive and intricate spiritual narrative. But these manuscripts didn't survive just because of luck or where they were found. People's bravery, sacrifice, and watchfulness kept them alive. Every monk who put their life on the line to protect a scroll, every scribe who carefully copied a text, and every community that kept knowledge secret helped keep a universe alive that most people will never see. They were devoted not for their own glory, but to protect something much bigger than themselves. This preservation has a very strong emotional effect. When you hold an Ethiopian manuscript, you can feel the weight of centuries pressing down on your fingers. The faint smell of ink and old paper carries whispers of devotion long ago, and every line is proof that you can survive against all odds. Wars, natural disasters, and people's desire for power tried to silence these stories, but they still live on. By doing this, they give us a glimpse not only into ancient knowledge, but also into the minds and hearts of the people who worked hard to protect it. The Ethiopian manuscripts remind us that some truths are worth protecting at all costs in a world where information is often short-lived and easy to lose. They want us to think about how fragile knowledge is, how important it is to protect it, and how dedicated the people who saw value in stories that the rest of the world forgot were. They talk about a time when faith, bravery, and hard work kept the hidden threads of history alive. These threads may hold the answers to questions we've only just begun to ask. The mystery of who protects Ethiopia goes beyond history. It is very human. It makes people think about how far they would go to protect what they thought was sacred. As we think about these monks, their sacrifices, and the manuscripts that survived, we start to see why Ethiopia became the keeper of the oldest biblical universe. The heavens themselves kept a record, a cosmic ledger, of what was to come long before the first sunrise touched the mountains of Ethiopia or any other part of the world. These weren't just regular writings or records of people's lives. They were the heavenly tablets, written with divine accuracy and detailing the fates of every being the Creator planned to create. One of these names stood out. It glowed faintly with a light that was brighter than the stars themselves: Adam. His name, carved in gold on translucent celestial stone, shone as if it knew how important it was, a sign of a life that had not yet been lived and a story that had not yet been told. Picture this. The sky is huge and endless, and the air is full of light that has no source and goes on forever. Angels of all shapes and sizes floated silently, their wings making waves of bright energy that spread through the sky. They leaned in closer to the tablets, their eyes wide with interest. Some whispered in musical tones, while others shook with amazement. They could still feel the weight of what they read, even though they were in the presence of God. This was a being like no other. The choices they made would have effects on all of creation, and their life would shape the course of human history. The Book of Jubilees doesn't just call these tablets writings. It calls them living records that are full of the energy of destiny. Every word written on them had a purpose, and every stroke was a planned act of divine foresight. People didn't just write down Adam's name. They celebrated it, thought about it, and talked about it. Some angels were very excited about the coming of humanity and the new order it would bring. Some people hesitated because they knew how fragile life is and that even with a perfect plan, free will could change history in ways no one could have predicted. This mix of awe and caution created a silent sense of anticipation that spread across the sky. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath at this moment before creation. Around the tablets, rivers of light, constellations that would one day be seen in the sky by people, and swirling clouds of cosmic dust moved in a silent ballet. Angels got closer, their wings brushing against each other as they shared thoughts and whispers that were older than time but still alive in that moment. They talked about and were amazed by the fate of a human who had not yet been born. They wondered how Adam, the first of his kind, would get around in a world that did not yet exist. Would he keep the promises written on these holy stones? Could he handle the tests that were predicted even before he was born? The emotional tension in heaven was clear. Some angels doubted the Creator's plan and whispered in fear and awe about the choices Adam would have to make. Some people had a deep, unexplainable love for the being whose name was so carefully carved. It was a love that went beyond understanding. This moment before creation wasn't just an administrative task. It was a cosmic event that showed how free will and divine design work together. Even though each angel was immortal and eternal, they all felt the weight of possibility and the duty of witnessing a destiny that would change the very nature of human life. The angels saw more than just a name when they looked at the tablets. They saw a reflection of creation itself, the threads that connect heaven and earth, and the connections that would shape every life that came after. From the rising of stars to the flow of rivers that had not yet formed, Adam's life was connected to the rhythms of the universe. There were already small, almost invisible notes on the tablets that recorded even the smallest details, like the choices he would make. Some angels bent down to look at the delicate notes, their eyes following paths that would help Adam through temptations, trials, and victories. Each mark told a story, and each story taught a lesson. Each lesson was a warning or encouragement from the Creator. There are subtle echoes of this vision in the Bible. Genesis suggests Adam's superiority by saying that he was made in God's image, which means he was different from everything else in creation. Jubilees elaborates on this by depicting a vision in which Adam's life was anticipated, his existence recognized in the celestial realms long before the formation of the earth. In this moment before creation, we can see how important humans are on a cosmic scale. Adam is not just the first man. He is the anchor of humanity's spiritual journey. He is the first chapter of a story that has been written in the stars and on tablets that have lasted through time. The pictures on the heavenly tablets make people feel both awe and a deep connection. As you watch, you can almost see yourself among the angels, watching them carefully write down their thoughts, feeling the hum of divine energy, and sensing the excitement of a life that is yet to be born. The story reminds us that even before birth, before time and space as we know them, people were already looking forward to and recording the journey of humanity. Adam's life was not left to chance. It was part of a cosmic plan, a blueprint of purpose and potential that was full of problems but also full of hope. And in this heavenly record, the tension of what will happen is matched by the fact that history will happen. Even though angels could not die, they still felt emotions that people would understand, like hope, fear, excitement, and love. They knew that Adam's decisions would have effects that went beyond this world and would affect future generations, shaping morality, culture, and spiritual understanding. The heavenly tablets are both a record and a warning. They remind us that destiny is written but not set in stone, and that free will and divine purpose are in a very delicate balance. Even as we picture these cosmic events, we can't help but feel a deep connection to Adam. His name, glowing on the tablets, is more than just a symbol. It invites us to think about our own place in the universe, the paths that may cross with our choices, and the unseen forces that have shaped human history. This story comes to life through the Ethiopian texts, which connect the mystery of the heavens with life on earth. Before the first soil was shaped and rivers carved paths through the earth, Adam was not a body of flesh and bone. He was a being of pure light, a soul whose essence radiated with an intensity that both awed and unsettled the celestial realm. He was not yet the man whose name would be remembered for all time, and he was not yet limited by the senses of humans. He was a firstborn soul, chosen and one of a kind. In this state before creation, Adam floated among the gods, aware of how special he was but also weighed down by a destiny he could barely understand. He felt both confused and clear. He felt a purpose greater than himself, a cosmic duty that kept him connected to events that were yet to happen. The angels had never seen anything like Adam's awareness before. They had seen countless souls and acts of creation, but here was a being whose light seemed to pulse in time with the universe itself. He asked questions, looked around, and felt. His mind reached into the heavens, seeing patterns and possibilities that no human could ever imagine. He felt a delicate tension inside him, a sense that he was both unique and open to harm. Even though he was brilliant, he knew that trials were coming and that choice and consequence were two sides of the same coin. The angels' actions showed how complicated the divine hierarchy is. Some people were in awe of Adam, drawn to the brightness and potential of this firstborn soul. Some people were confused and couldn't understand how a being that existed before time could be both weak and powerful at the same time. Some even had trouble with jealousy, knowing that Adam's role would be more important than theirs and that his choices would shape worlds they could only watch. Soft but strong whispers filled the heavenly courts, echoing Adam's uniqueness and hinting at the important role he would play in the story of creation as it unfolded. At this point, Adam started to understand the divine purpose that was all around him. He was supposed to be a bridge between worlds, a link between the physical and the non-physical, and a way for life, choice, and conscience to come into the physical world. Knowing he had this duty made him feel better and worse at the same time. Every thought and every moment of self-awareness was a step toward a destiny that would one day require the courage to walk on earth, to face temptation, and to embody the divine image in ways that angels could see but never fully live in. Adam's emotions, curiosity, fear, pride, and humility were in conflict with each other, which made the heavens shake. Some angels came to him and offered gentle advice, their voices like wind through crystal, giving him warnings and insights. Others stayed back, not sure whether to step in or just watch as a unique soul unfolded. Adam could tell that they were all reacting in different ways, and he could feel the complicated web of divine observation. He was loved, watched, envied, and admired all at the same time. These early interactions, though small, helped people understand how relationships work and how divine intention and free will work together. Adam showed traits that would define humanity for generations, even before he had a body. He was always curious and wanted to know everything about how the universe worked. But with knowledge came a sense of responsibility, a feeling that every choice had effects that went beyond what he could see at the time. The light that made him up sparkled with possibilities, but it also showed how uncertain it is to be free. He was a firstborn soul, but not a perfect one. He was a learner and a traveler in a place where time had not yet begun and death was still a long way off. The angels felt things that were similar to how they felt because they were so complex. Some people came up to Adam with cautious respect, teaching and guiding him, while others just watched, fascinated by the sight of a being made for a specific purpose in creation. The murmurs and whispers that passed between the heavenly host made a low hum of excitement and tension. Even angels, who are eternal and ageless, could feel the weight of Adam's presence. This was a sign that the first human was meant to do something very important. Adam's relationship with God was direct and personal. He felt waves of energy and a faint vibration that connected him to the blueprint of creation. He felt like he was going to be the mediator, the way that divine order would meet earthly chaos, when he thought about it. He knew that his life as a light being was just a preparation, and that every thought, feeling, and moment of awareness was a step toward becoming a body. It was a huge responsibility, but it was also a huge chance to set the standard for what it meant to be human, to have a conscience, and to live. But even though Adam was very smart, he was still a soul learning about the vastness of life. He felt doubt, confusion, and a strong desire to understand. He knew that he would live among people who would test, challenge, and change him, and that the choices he made would have effects that went beyond what he could see. In this early stage of development, before flesh and time, he went through a concentrated, almost sacred form of growth that prepared him spiritually for what would later define the human condition itself. In this light-being form, Adam was both knowledgeable and innocent, aware and dependent. He was chosen, yes, but he wasn't immune to the weakness that would later define the human journey. Angels, even though they are eternal, couldn't fully understand what this firstborn soul went through, but they did see it, talk about it, and sometimes even envy it. Their reactions were like the complexity of life, a mix of awe, fear, love, and jealousy, all focused on a single, shining being whose fate was still unknown. A council of angels met high above the earth, which had not yet formed. The air was full of heavenly energy and excitement. The heavenly hall went on forever, and its walls sparkled with light that moved and danced like a living tapestry. Adam, the firstborn soul whose name shone on the heavenly tablets, was the main focus of this amazing gathering. Even among immortals, the size of his existence caused both awe and fear. Loyal angels felt a sense of awe, sensing the divine purpose within him. Others, the watchers, felt a strange tension rise, a mix of curiosity, doubt, and the first whispers of envy. The council was in a very good mood. Those who were on the Creator's side looked at Adam's form before he was created with pride and seriousness. They saw that his design was perfect, that his potential was brilliant, and that he had a duty to live up to his light-being essence. The wings of each angel fluttered softly, showing that they agreed with and trusted the divine plan. But not everyone agreed with this point of view. The Watchers, powerful heavenly beings who could be proud, questioned what they saw. The idea that a newly formed soul could have more authority, purpose, or meaning than beings that had existed for all time made people uneasy. The hall seemed to vibrate with the unspoken tension, the small conflict between loyalty and rebellion. Some watchers were unsure of what to do because they were feeling things they had never felt before. Envy rose quietly without being asked, like a shadow that made things less clear. They looked at Adam, whose very presence gave off a potential they had never had before, and they wondered why this light being, this baby soul, should get attention or love. They put themselves in his shoes, felt pride and frustration, and struggled to understand how the Creator had made things. Their inner conflict was clear, like a storm that wouldn't go away or show itself completely. The whispers between them were like winds blowing through crystal halls, soft but full of meaning. The loyal angels, on the other hand, stayed focused and watched not only Adam but also the sneaky actions of their peers. They could feel the Watchers' hearts growing stronger and the difficult path that lay ahead. In their quiet watchfulness, they knew that Adam's presence before creation would be a test for both humans and the heavenly host. The divine plan, which is eternal and complicated, required that all beings face the conflict between duty and desire and between obedience and pride. These moments of watching planted the seeds of what would later become rebellion, but the loyal angels stayed strong and ready to witness the story unfold with unwavering faith. The Watchers' inner conflict was a show in and of itself. They couldn't deny Adam's beauty, but they didn't like it because it made them feel bad that one person could be more than they were. They thought in circles of comparisons and what-ifs, picturing how things might be different if the roles were switched. Jealousy and curiosity fought each other, and the emotional push and pull made the council tense. Even though they weren't talking, their struggle was clear in the way their energy resonated and the small changes in light and vibration that showed they were at odds with each other. Even though this debate in the sky didn't have any words, it had big effects. The Watchers' jealousy and doubt would later lead to real rebellion. The Nephilim, giant people who lived on Earth, were partly the result of the decisions that were made here, in the unseen tension of heavenly anticipation. The fall of some angels and the corruption of some human lines were all closely linked to this moment when Adam's existence before creation challenged the pride and complacency of beings who had never faced limits or consequences. Each look, thought, and pulse of awareness in the council was a sign of things to come that would change the course of history on both heaven and earth. Even though things were getting tense, this heavenly council was still very beautiful. The light from the heavenly tablets lit up every corner, bringing out the subtle differences in how angels looked. A mix of awe and tension made a tapestry of feelings that showed both devotion and doubt. Even though some were jealous, everyone knew how important Adam was. His presence was like a fulcrum, a point where the balance of cosmic events could change, and the weight of that realization made the hall feel heavy. The story of this council shows that even beings who can't die are not immune to the difficulties of hierarchy and the complexities of emotion. Adam's unique form before creation made people feel things that were very human, like admiration, confusion, pride, and fear. The way these feelings interacted showed how hard it is to find the right balance between obedience and rebellion, a theme that would run through the whole story of humanity. The angels had to face their own limits, their own desires, and the strange idea of a creation that could go beyond what they thought was possible and challenge what they thought they knew when they saw Adam. People can picture themselves among the angels in this movie scene, feeling the electric tension, sensing the moral and emotional stakes, and understanding how important Adam's presence is. It was a moment that went beyond time, where cosmic order met raw, unfiltered emotion, and where the first human life was already casting a long shadow over both heaven and earth. The heavenly council didn't speak, but it was full of purpose and consequences, with a dramatic mix of loyalty, jealousy, and divine foresight. Long before the first rivers cut their winding paths and mountains reached the sky, people thought of the earth not just as a place to live, but as a mirror of a being yet to walk its soil. For a long time, Ethiopian mystics have believed that the world was shaped after Adam, and that every hill, ocean, and cloud pattern reflected the essence of the first human soul. In this view, Adam wasn't just a passenger in creation, he was the blueprint for it, a bright template from which the whole material universe came to be. Picture this: cosmic light spilling over shapeless landscapes, divine hands drawing the outlines of continents, and peaks and valleys rising in perfect symmetry. Rivers started to flow along invisible grids, following patterns that were built into Adam's very soul. Forests opened up in fractals of his being, and every leaf and branch vibrated with the energy of awareness before creation. Creatures didn't just appear out of nowhere, they did so on purpose, and their shapes and actions showed parts of the first human's essence. The skies themselves, painted in changing colors and stars, were set up to reflect his bright presence. This made a world that was both useful and beautiful, and it was deeply connected to the soul of its first inhabitant. This cosmic blueprint shows a deep truth: Adam's importance went beyond his physical form. The Ethiopian manuscripts say that the first person was a small version of the universe, with the patterns and rhythms that would later be seen in nature inside his soul. Mountains were like extensions of his strength, rivers were like paths for his thoughts, and forests were like the many possibilities he had. Even the tiniest things, like the bugs crawling on the forest floor and the birds flying gracefully through the sky, showed parts of Adam's plan before he made them. Every part of the earth vibrated with purpose, as if a soul whose presence would change the course of life itself was echoing in the background. The divine pattern went beyond just shape. Energy flowed in line with Adam's essence, guiding the balance between predator and prey, the cycles of day and night, and the growth of ecosystems. Seasons came into being in sync with the rhythms that were written into his soul, making sure that life could grow in a precise but beautiful way. Ethiopian mystics call this a living resonance, a symphony of creation that took place around the first human. This person's pre-physical presence set the rules for how things would happen. Every sunrise and sunset, every storm and gentle breeze, showed signs of the design that came from a being who had not yet taken his first breath. In this cosmic narrative, the essence of human identity is established. To comprehend our existence and our position on Earth, one must first acknowledge that humanity embodies divine intention, perpetuating the blueprint initiated in Adam. The mountains we climb, the rivers we cross, and the forests we walk through are not random places. They are all parts of a soul that is strong, curious, and has a purpose. In essence, we are inheritors of a design that predates time, a living echo of the being who existed solely as light and consciousness before flesh. The story also shows how people are responsible for their actions. If the world was made in Adam's image, then our responsibility is not just a job, but a continuation of God's plan. To disrupt, destroy, or exploit creation is to meddle with the very essence of the first human soul. From an Ethiopian point of view, respecting the natural order means recognizing Adam's importance before he was created and that life itself reflects the patterns of consciousness that created it. This comprehension alters one's perception of the environment, culture, and the complex interdependence of life on Earth. This vision has a movie-like quality that makes it seem almost real. You could picture standing on the edge of a cliff, with the wide view in front of you echoing the shape of a bright soul. Rivers twist and turn in beautiful ways, showing how thoughts flowed before creation. Forests grow in planned groups, and each tree is a sign of purpose and intention. Animals move in a way that seems to be guided by invisible hands that are in tune with a plan that has been around since before time began. The skies themselves are full of light patterns that match the first human essence, reminding people that Earth and humanity have always been connected. When you think about what humans can do, this link between Adam and creation gets stronger. Just as the Earth unfolded according to his pre-creation image, so too does every person have a part of that original light-being essence inside them. Creativity, empathy, resilience, and curiosity are not arbitrary endowments but reflections of the primordial consciousness that influence the cosmos. When people interact with nature, come up with new ideas, or share deep insights, they are following patterns that were set in motion before time began, following lines that lead back to the bright figure who existed before flesh and matter. The Ethiopian teachings, through this storytelling lens, encourage viewers to see creation not as a static backdrop but as a dynamic reflection of Adam's life. Mountains, rivers, skies, and animals are more than just pretty things to look at. They are living records of the first human soul, echoes of a plan that people are still living and changing. To comprehend this is to recognize the remarkable link between divine design and human experience, between the luminous Adam and each person who inhabits the earth today. Before the earth took shape and Adam took his first breath, he was a being of radiant light, a glowing form that pulsed with energy and awareness. His body wasn't made of flesh or bone. It was made of a bright light that lit up the area around him. Every movement sent waves of bright energy across the sky, giving off a soft glow that made the stars look dim in comparison. Adam was more than just a soul in this form. He was a living prism of divine essence, a reflection of the Creator's will, and the first conscious life in the universe. This light body was whole, in balance, and able to take care of itself. Everything about him seemed to be a reflection of the universe's perfection. The way energy flowed through him like rivers of light, and the way his thoughts formed subtle waves in the ether around him. In this bright state, Adam was aware of things in a way that no human could understand. He saw dimensions, possibilities, and connections that would later be muted when he took on the limitations of flesh. His mind was a source of pre-creation knowledge, free from the limits of death and the stress of living in the material world. But the divine plan needed change. The beautiful Adam, who looked so beautiful in heaven, was meant to live in a body of clay and walk around in a world that needed limits, senses, and death. This change was more than just a change in substance. It changed how people saw and felt things. The fall from light to matter was not a punishment, but a necessary step to connect the divine and the earthly. The first light body's brightness would be hidden by flesh, making it less bright so that people could interact, learn, and develop free will. People would forget about the beauty and purity of his original form, but they would instinctively look for it across generations. Adam's understanding of this change was complicated. There was a sense of excitement and fear underneath the amazement he felt at how perfect his glowing form was. The embodiment in clay meant being open to being hurt, having limits, and having to make choices. He felt both excitement and a hint of sadness, as if he were leaving a state of pure light for one tied to the cycles of life and the fragility of death. But there was purpose in this tension. The light body would guide him, even though it was meant to be hidden. Its essence would seep into his body, leaving traces of its original brilliance in his soul forever. The difference between light and clay also shows how easy it is for people to forget. The memory of Adam's bright form faded once it was covered by the physical body. People, for all their beauty and potential, are just echoes of that first light, pieces of consciousness that want to reconnect with the original divine essence. The Ethiopian texts talk a lot about this loss, which is like the soul's quiet amnesia that makes it forget where it came from while it deals with the limits of living in the physical world. The tale of Adam's light body serves as a reminder that every person has a hidden brilliance, a spark of the original form that existed before time and space. You can picture Adam's light body as a glowing figure hovering over the shapeless earth, with bright strands of energy flowing like rivers of gold and silver. His patterns of being are connected to cosmic currents that show us the hidden structure of the universe. Angels look at him with respect, some with awe, and others with curiosity. Their faces show the mystery and majesty of a being who is both human and divine. There is a silent tension in the air as everyone waits for the body to be made of clay. Each angel knows how important this passage is and understands that the change marks the start of a story that will be told over and over again. Even in this bright state, Adam showed traits that would later define people. He asked questions, thought about things, and felt the first stirrings of emotions like curiosity, wonder, and a growing sense of responsibility. His mind held the plan for how to learn, grow, and become more moral. But in the light body, these qualities were pure and not affected by the problems of living in the physical world. The story makes it clear that the soul's brilliance is still there, but it's hidden. It's waiting for people to find pieces of that original light again through acts of creation, reflection, and moral choice. The transition from light to clay also set the stage for the later narrative of human struggle and redemption. The memory of brilliance, now obscured, becomes the source of longing, spiritual yearning, and the pursuit of knowledge. Our instincts to look for things, make things, and connect with other people are echoes of that first bright life, reminders of what was and what could be brought back. The Ethiopian teachings depict Adam's light body not solely as a historical or mystical notion, but as a dynamic metaphor for human potential and the perpetual link to divine origin. The story of Adam's glowing body is really about identity, change, and memory. It shows the first human as both heavenly and earthly, shining yet limited by divine purpose, eternal yet entering a world of change. Even though the light body is hidden under clay, its light continues to shine on the human soul for generations, sparking curiosity, empathy, and the search for meaning. It is this original brilliance, which is still there in small pieces in every person, that makes us think, wonder, and think about the possibility of getting back to the state from which all life came. The Ethiopian records talk about a soul that was created 5,500 years before Adam's clay body was made and the rivers and mountains of the earth took shape. This Adam existed before he had a body, in a place outside of time. He was a bright consciousness whose awareness would eventually take over the body that people would come to know. The manuscripts say that this was an intentional act of divine foresight, a timeline in which the first soul could learn, watch, and align with the cosmic order before entering the material world. In this vision, Adam was not only the first human on Earth, but also a part of a prophecy that lasted for thousands of years. He was a living link between the heavenly and the earthly. Ethiopian mystics say that Adam's soul was able to fully experience pre-creation awareness because he lived in this early time. He looked at the stars, saw angels arguing about his future, and felt the vibrations of the universe itself. Every moment, every little change in the universe was part of a big plan. These 5,500 years weren't wasted. They were full of learning, adapting, and slowly getting in line with a divine plan that would eventually lead to Adam's life on Earth. When you think about this, you start to understand how incredibly patient and foresight the Creator was, arranging every moment to make sure the perfect embodiment happened at the right time. The texts also connect Adam's existence before creation to prophecies about Christ, creating a timeline that goes from the first soul to the promise of salvation. These connections are deep and not obvious. The bright being who existed long before Adam on earth holds the seeds of salvation within him, the spiritual resonance that will eventually show up in the line that leads to Christ. This cosmic continuum shows how human history and divine intent are connected. It suggests that every action and every moment of consciousness before creation adds to a story that has a climax that echoes through time. This story has a lot of emotional depth. Think about someone who knows both eternity and the present, and who has been carrying the weight of fate for 5,500 years. The waiting, the silent witnessing of the universe, the seeing of angels and cosmic events. All of these things shape a mind that will later live in a human body. This time period is both grand and lonely. Adam's soul is in awe of how big the universe is, but it also longs for a physical body and wants to fully engage with a world that exists beyond bright light. The Ethiopian records give this early existence a depth that human history alone cannot convey, inviting viewers to feel the vastness of purpose in one person's journey. For thousands of years, Adam's essence was being shaped and readied for the difficulties of human life. The manuscripts talk about how the soul learns to be patient, strong, and morally aware by watching both loyal angels and rebellious watchers and learning from events in the sky. Every meeting and every wave of emotion in the heavenly realm was a step toward the inevitable experience of death. By the time his clay body was ready, Adam's mind was already seasoned, in tune with the rhythms of divine will, and fully able to do what he was meant to do on earth. The Ethiopian view of time is also shown in the 5,500-year prophecy, which shows how time is layered in complex ways. Western interpretations frequently emphasize linear history. However, these texts disclose intersecting timelines where soul and body, prophecy and reality, and heaven and earth converge. Adam's existence before creation is linked to divine plans, heavenly arguments, and future events in human history. This shows a tapestry of connected moments that spans thousands of years. The size of this plan is so big that it makes you think about a universe where fate isn't immediate but slowly and carefully woven, like threads of gold that stretch across the fabric of eternity. This story also shows how small and big people are at the same time. Although a single human life may appear ephemeral, Ethiopian timelines indicate that each soul engages in a cosmic rhythm that transcends daily existence. Adam's 5,500-year prologue reminds us that history, prophecy, and purpose are all connected. It also shows us that the story of one soul can echo through the ages and that humanity is both the heir and the continuation of these big plans. In this way, the human experience is a part of a story that never ends, a chance to connect with the foresight, wisdom, and bright consciousness of the first created soul. One can picture this hidden timeline as a huge, glowing stream that runs through the sky, with Adam's bright soul moving along it, watching events, subtly interacting with angels, and feeling the pull of fate. Light and time are connected, and the past and future exist in a continuum where Adam's eventual life on Earth is the result of countless moments that were never seen. Angels observe the soul's journey, some with awe and others with envy, and each moment of pre-creation awareness influences the formation of humanity's earliest history. From the Ethiopian point of view, Adam's early life was anything but passive. He wasn't just watching. His mind took in, thought about, and interacted with the divine order as it unfolded. Every pulse of energy and every look at how the universe works was a practice for living in the real world. When the clay body was finally made, Adam didn't start from scratch. He came into being fully prepared, carrying the echoes of thousands of years within him. This point of view changes the way we usually think about creation. It shows that human life is not just an accident or an endpoint, but the careful result of a carefully planned cosmic plan. By thinking about the 5,500-year prophecy, viewers can feel how big time and purpose are, how patient the Creator is, and how heavy destiny is for one bright soul. It makes it clear that Adam's journey is not separate from the larger story of humanity and salvation, but is instead part of it, connecting consciousness before creation with the eventual coming of Christ. The size of this hidden timeline makes you think, wonder, and deeply understand the complex, purposeful design that went into the first human life. Long before Adam stepped foot on the newly formed earth, there was already tension in the heavens. A subtle storm was brewing among the Watchers, angels who were supposed to watch over and guide the cosmos. These immortal and radiant beings had worked together in peace for a long time. But when humanity came into being, it brought with it a soul that could rival them in purpose, creativity, and destiny. The Ethiopian texts talk about the first signs of worry among the Watchers. They were worried that Adam, the newly created being, would take a place of honor above even those who had served the Creator for a long time. This wasn't just pride, it was a serious challenge to the cosmic order, a wave that would last for thousands of years. The angels saw Adam's soul, which was bright and already formed, carrying the wisdom of thousands of years before the clay body even existed. In this bright state, Adam's mind reflected not only God's will but also a potential that could have been even more brilliant than their own. The loyal Watchers were in awe and wanted to protect the first human because they knew how special he was. But for some, the thought of being forced to move made them jealous, scared, and rebellious. These strong but unspoken feelings caused cracks in the heavenly council, which would later lead to conflicts that would affect people. The Ethiopian manuscripts use vivid images to show this tension. The skies, which are usually full of harmony and bright light, seemed to shake with the unspoken disagreement of powerful beings. Angels' conversations had more meaning than words could say. The currents of thought were almost visible, showing excitement, worry, and the fragile balance of honor. The Watchers weren't evil by nature. They were beings who could be very devoted and insightful. However, when a soul that might be better than them came along, they became vulnerable, afraid of being made obsolete in a universe built for obedience and hierarchy. This emotional landscape makes these heavenly beings more relatable by showing that even immortals deal with pride, expectations, and doubt. In this context, jealousy is not shown as a small or unimportant thing, but as a cosmic force, a tension strong enough to change how creation happens. The Ethiopian texts imply that the fear experienced by certain watchers was both instinctual and prophetic, instinctual in their quest to preserve status and purpose, and prophetic in that their insurrection would anticipate the challenges humanity would face upon entering the world. Adam's soul, bright and destined for greatness, became the center around which the balance of the heavens would change. The Watchers' quiet jealousy would not stay hidden. It would eventually lead to the wars, moral quandaries, and even disasters that would shape human history for generations. There was a lot of tension, even among the angels who stayed loyal. They saw their friends' jealousy and felt both sad and scared, knowing that Adam's fate was supposed to be one of leadership and enlightenment, not conflict. The Ethiopian manuscripts show how emotionally charged these interactions were. They show that the struggle was not just about power, but also about understanding, purpose, and following God's will. The stakes were huge. The future of humanity, the integrity of creation, and the harmony of the heavens all depended on what happened. The story focuses on the universal idea of honor and purpose. Adam's soul embodied the promise of a novel form of excellence, integrating divine purpose with experiential learning, creativity, and ethical consciousness. The Watchers found this mix both exciting and scary. People who were jealous questioned their own purpose. They wondered if their centuries of service would be overshadowed by someone who was born into light but was meant to live in matter. The Ethiopian texts don't hold back when they show these angels as emotional beings who can feel doubt, pride, and regret. This shows that the roots of cosmic rebellion are closely related to the same feelings that people have on Earth. This story also tells us where chaos and conflict in human history came from. The subtle cracks in the heavenly council hint at the arrival of moral ambiguity, temptation, and opposing forces in the physical world. By knowing that the rebellion started because of jealousy and fear, viewers can follow a line from Adam's life before he was created to the Nephilim, to the moral struggles of early humans, and to the ongoing fight between order and chaos. Ethiopian manuscripts depict these events not as discrete occurrences but as interwoven strands, forming a tapestry of causality that associates celestial determinations with terrestrial repercussions. The story resonates emotionally because it reflects human experiences. Everyone can relate to feelings of jealousy, fear of being replaced, and the desire for honor and recognition. However, in the celestial context, these feelings have infinitely larger effects. The Ethiopian view turns these vague feelings into powers that shape the universe, making the viewer feel both close and grand. One starts to feel the weight of responsibility, the importance of intention, and the lasting effects of choices, even those made long before the world was created. One might picture the heavens full of tension, with glowing beings moving in bright patterns, currents of light shaking with unspoken competition, and Adam's soul shining with a light that makes people both awed and envious. The air seems charged, as if you can hear the vibrations of heavenly deliberation. Some angels murmur in fear and admiration, while others bristle with jealousy. Every moment has a secret meaning, and every look hints at the problems that will come when people enter the physical world. The universe itself seems to be holding its breath, knowing that the outcome of this early conflict will determine the fate of the earth and the course of history. The Ethiopian manuscripts use storytelling to show that the beginnings of human struggle are not random or arbitrary, but rather reflections of a deeper drama that happened before creation. Adam's bright and undefined future is the center of angels' fears, dreams, and loyalty. This sets the stage for events that will have an impact for generations. The story shows how everything is connected, how choices made in the heavens affect human history, how human potential echoes divine design, and how the eternal struggle between envy and devotion shapes the fate of worlds. Adam's bright form from before creation was ready to come down from the heavens into the physical world. He was leaving behind the vastness of eternity for the limits of time. The change was huge. It was a crossing from light to matter, from being aware of everything to having senses limited by flesh and bone. Adam felt a rush of feelings, awe, excitement, and a hint of fear, as if the very fabric of his life was being stretched and changed. The heavenly currents that had held him for thousands of years now felt far away, and the bright light that had defined who he was about to mix with clay, water, and air. It was a huge shock, a change so big that even the angels watching the fall held their breath, knowing that history was changing around this important moment. Eden, the first earthly sanctuary, was more than just a garden. It was a link between the heavens and the physical world. Every tree, every river, and every gentle breeze seemed to carry sounds from the heavenly realm that Adam had left behind. The manuscripts say that the garden was a place where divine geometry met natural abundance. The light of the Creator came through the leaves and water, making patterns that reminded people of Adam's former brilliance. When Adam stepped into this space, he was overwhelmed by new sensations: the smell of dirt and plants, the warmth of the sun, and the soft rustling of creatures moving nearby. These were all sensations that were completely new to him, since he had only known the bright currents of eternity. The Ethiopian texts stress that this shock of being real was both physical and emotional. Adam's first breath of air on earth felt strange. Gravity pressed against him, and the limits of time measured every heartbeat. The knowledge that he was no longer free and clear like he used to be brought with it a quiet sadness. But it was in this weakness that the story of humanity really starts. By becoming flesh, Adam was able to experience duality, choice, and limitation. These are all important for purpose, growth, and understanding to happen. The manuscripts indicate that absent this passage, the teachings of earth would remain unacquired, and the course of humanity would remain unfinished. The change feels like what everyone goes through when they feel like they have lost their home and can't remember it. Everyone has the echo of a forgotten beginning, the sound of a light body, a time before limits, and a place where awareness was limitless. Adam's descent into Eden represents this existential feeling of leaving a place that is always home and entering a place where challenges, feelings, and death shape who you are. We are invited to connect with this moment on a very personal level, knowing that feeling out of place is as old as people themselves. It's not a flaw, it's part of the design, a way to wake up and eventually make peace with the divine spark inside. The manuscripts give a stunningly detailed picture of Eden, showing it as a living mirror of the heavenly currents that Adam had left behind. Rivers flow like silver threads carrying the light of creation. Trees reach for the sky in perfect geometric patterns, and the air hums with the sound of life in its first fullness. Animals, plants, and the elements themselves seem to be extensions of God's will, with their shapes and movements in line with the memory of Adam's bright form. For Adam, who had just been born, every interaction was a chance to learn something new and connect with something he had lost. It was a chance to feel the divine order through physical experience. Even the smallest touch of dirt or water had meaning, reminding us that the sacred can be found in the physical world if we know how to look for it. This bridge between heaven and earth also had a purpose. Adam's descent into Eden facilitated the gradual amalgamation of his pre-creation consciousness with the newly acquired faculties of a human body. The manuscripts talk about a subtle attunement process in which his bright essence mixed with clay and his soul got used to the rhythms of thought, movement, and breath in matter. It didn't happen all at once. It took time to watch, think about, and interact with the garden. Adam learned the rhythms of life, the results of his actions, and the responsibilities that come with being a person through Eden. The garden was a place where he could experiment with life and where time and space met. It got him ready for the choices, challenges, and moral decisions that would shape human history. The difference between Adam's bright origin and his new mortal form is very striking, both emotionally and visually. Once, his life was full of unbroken brilliance. Now, he carried a hidden light inside him, a glow that was limited by his body. But this limitation was part of the miracle. It made it possible for growth, thinking, and moral awareness to happen. His descent shows how memory and experience are at odds with each other, how what was is at odds with what is, and how the original brilliance of the soul continues to affect the journey of life. This dynamic creates the conditions for human stories to unfold, from the first tests in Eden to the moral and spiritual tests that every generation faces. As Adam started to explore Eden, he felt both connected to and separate from his old life. The rivers whispered about heavenly streams, the trees reminded him of glowing patterns he had once been a part of, and the animals moved with a quiet grace that echoed the rhythms of the heavens. But the limits of his body reminded him that he was now in a world where choices had consequences and actions had effects. The manuscripts say that this dual awareness, the memory of light and the experience of matter, was the basis for human consciousness. It let Adam move through the world with both wisdom and curiosity, with awe and responsibility. Adam's story becomes a mirror of the human journey when he falls into Eden. We also have to find a balance between what we remember about who we really are and the limits of our physical lives. We sometimes long for clarity, brilliance, and purpose, but we have to learn, grow, and act within the limits of the physical world. The Ethiopian texts use Adam's fall as a powerful metaphor for this state, showing that the shock of being alive is not just a historical event, but a lesson that is still going on. It is an invitation to find the hidden light within and to deal with the difficulties of life on earth with awareness, patience, and purpose. As Adam walked through the lush fields of Eden, a part of another world stayed with him. This world was full of light, huge, and limitless, and he had lived there long before he had a body and soil to define his experience. The Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve keeps this memory alive in great detail, telling how Adam would sometimes look at the rivers, mountains, and trees and feel echoes of a bright homeland that he no longer fully owned. This upper world was a place of clear thought, shining knowledge, and easy understanding. Even though he now lived in a body of clay, he still remembered it. It was a bittersweet gift that reminded him of the greatness he had left behind and the limits that being human put on him. It wasn't sudden or completely permanent that Adam lost this memory, but it was very important to him emotionally. The manuscripts talk about times when the heavenly mind's clarity would fade away and be replaced by confusion, wonder, and the slow, careful discovery of life on earth. Breathing, walking, and naming things were all simple tasks, but they felt wrong, like his soul was learning to follow new rules while remembering a time when it was free. This tension created a deep desire and a subtle sadness that ran through his whole being, affecting his thoughts, feelings, and decisions. Adam's pain was not just his own. It was a reflection of the universal human experience of wanting to be in a state that we can never fully get back to. Eve's presence in this story adds a deep emotional level. The manuscripts talk about how she woke up and connected with Adam's memory. She could feel the faint traces of his heavenly past through empathy. Even though she was new, she felt moments of longing, as if she had seen the upper world in a past life that she had forgotten. Their shared knowledge connected the past and the present, creating an emotional bond based on both wonder and loss. They walked around the garden together, but underneath the beauty of creation was an ache that couldn't be seen, the constant reminder that they had once had a greater understanding and a greater light. This emotional tension would be at the heart of the human story, shaping their decisions and the events that happened in Eden. The Ethiopian texts depict this lost memory as a spiritual and psychological phenomenon, underscoring its significance to contemporary humanity. Everyone has a faint memory of a time when they were whole, a feeling of being out of place, and a desire to be whole that goes beyond time and culture. Adam's struggle serves as an allegory for a universal condition, the sensation of being estranged from something essential, a longing for the clarity and freedom that preceded existence, constraints, and human awareness. It is a soft pain, a whisper in the heart, but it shapes people's curiosity, moral pursuit, and search for meaning. The manuscripts say that this desire is not a flaw but a sign of where it came from, a reminder of the light that is in every person's soul. Adam's memories of the upper world weren't just emotional, they were also intellectual. He would sometimes remember the pattern of cosmic light, the harmonious sound of creation, and the complex order of heavenly beings. These memories helped him understand the garden and how to take care of life in Eden. But every memory came with a pang, a brief realization of what had been lost. The manuscripts underscore that this dual consciousness, encompassing both memory and absence, was instrumental in influencing Adam's moral and spiritual evolution. The pain of forgetting helped him grow, think about things, and feel sorry for others, which helped him deal with problems, temptations, and the duties of life on earth. The way Adam and Eve's feelings affect each other shows how deep their bond is. They were also walking through the invisible landscape of memory and longing as they walked, took care of the garden, and named its animals. The manuscripts say that there were times when Eve could feel Adam's silent grief, and her presence gave him comfort and stability. They balanced the light of memory with the realities of life on earth, creating the first partnership of understanding and shared purpose. This story shows how people can feel grief, wonder, and connection all at once, a theme that has been important for many generations. If you picture this, you might see Adam looking across Eden at the sun shining on the riverbanks and feeling an echo of a place that is brighter than anything on earth. Angels sparkled in his mind, heavenly currents flowed, and the patterns of divine will were clear, even if only for a moment. He then reached for the simple beauty of a flower or the coolness of water, and the memory faded, leaving him in the real world. Eve's awareness was like his own, and they both felt the same longing and love. These moments show not only how deep the emotions of people were before the fall, but also how memory, identity, and the rise of human consciousness all work together. The manuscripts also suggest that the loss of memory happened slowly, over time, so that people could fully adjust to life on Earth. Adam was not suddenly cut off from the upper world. Instead, his soul adapted to the rhythms of death while still being able to see the original light. These brief, precious glimpses helped him understand what was right and wrong, what his purpose was, and what he could do. They became a spiritual guide, subtly shaping choices, perceptions, and the development of moral awareness. The Ethiopian view sees this process as preparation rather than punishment. It shows that memory and loss are part of a divine plan to help people gain wisdom, grow, and have new experiences. In this context, The human desire for something beyond our immediate experience mirrors Adam's own experience. The feeling that we have left a bright home and that our lives are just shadows of a fuller reality is something that all people have in their minds. The Ethiopian manuscripts turn Adam's personal struggle into a universal story, reminding us that our emotional and spiritual restlessness is not an accident, but a natural part of the journey of the soul. Every moment of awe and every quest for significance is intertwined with the resonance of a pre-creation reality, a radiant recollection that perpetually influences consciousness throughout time. Long before the first Western Bibles were written, there were texts that told whole chapters of humanity's earliest stories. These texts told a more detailed and complex story of creation, Adam, and the unfolding divine plan. The Ethiopian manuscripts, Jubilees, the Book of Adam and Eve, and Kebra-Nagast, kept information that was later taken out of Western versions. These texts contained narratives of Adam's existence prior to creation, his radiant form, and his arrival in Eden, as well as descriptions of divine councils, humanity's cosmic duties, and the concealed lineage of kings and prophets. Over the course of hundreds of years, as empires grew, theological authorities gained power, and politics and religion became more closely linked, these chapters started to disappear from the canonical stories of the West. The erasure was not just an administrative mistake. It was a deliberate attempt to silence knowledge and shape memory to fit the ideas and power structures of the time. Think about how hard it was for scribes in faraway Ethiopian monasteries to copy scrolls by candlelight, often while they were being attacked by enemies, fire, or political unrest. Each manuscript was more than just a text. It was a vessel of memory and truth, a fragile thread that connected people to the divine. The monks who kept these works knew how valuable they were and how dangerous they were. Some chapters were hidden from outsiders because they were thought to be too profound, while others were left out on purpose when Western scholars put together the canonical Bible. The manuscripts tell stories of loss, strength, and quiet rebellion. Each page that was kept was a way to fight against the slow erasure of the larger story of humanity. There were many reasons for the removal. Politically, new empires tried to gain more power, often using religion as a weapon. People thought stories that talked about other spiritual leaders, hidden knowledge, or divine favor from non-Western lineages were dangerous. Some Ethiopian texts kept stories about kings and prophets who could trace their lineage back to Adam in ways that went against Western religious beliefs. Including these kinds of chapters would have gone against the main religious stories and weakened the power of central authorities. By removing these texts, authorities could keep both political stability and theological uniformity, but they would have to give up parts of human history and memory. Theological factors were also very important. The process of canonization in the West involved choosing which texts were thought to be inspired, which ones fit with doctrine, and which ones might lead to interpretations that were thought to be heretical or dangerous. People often thought that chapters that talked about Adam's life before he was created, his interactions with angels, or the heavenly hierarchies were too controversial. The idea that humans existed before the physical world or that angels felt jealousy and conflict made simple religious stories about creation and fall more complicated. As a result, these insights were pushed to the side, leaving a hole in Western knowledge of the relationship between humans and God and the true depth of Eden's story. Historically, the removal of chapters was also due to problems with translation and distribution. Western scholars often couldn't read texts written in Guizi, Hebrew, or Aramaic because they had to rely on Latin translations. Over time, parts that were hard to translate or understand were left out, either on purpose or by accident. As these omissions piled up, the richer, more complex stories were turned into a simpler, less detailed story. Ethiopian scribes and scholars, cut off from Western theological politics, kept these works safe, making a secret archive of knowledge that would last through wars, colonization, and changes in religion. Their dedication made it possible for later generations to see points of view that had been purposefully hidden in other places. It is impossible to overstate how emotionally heavy these omissions are. Think of a chapter that talks about Adam's beautiful body, how he knew about things before he was created, and how angels were amazed when they first saw him. These stories could have changed how people thought about themselves if they had been widely known. Think about the moral and cosmic lessons that Western audiences never learned that are now quietly resting in the pages of these texts, which are protected by Ethiopian custodians. The manuscripts express both grief and fortitude, grief for the suppressed truths and fortitude in the awareness that certain fragments endure, awaiting discovery by those who seek them. These texts are full of mystery. The chapters that were removed often suggest secrets that are too deep for most people to understand. They show cosmic plans, angelic hierarchies, and human responsibilities that were hidden in the Western Bible. Some talk about prophecies, hidden family trees, and moral frameworks that go against what most people think. The manuscripts prompt the reader to contemplate the implications of recovering these lost chapters, to reconstruct the original narrative, and to perceive the comprehensive account of humanity's origin, purpose, and destiny. For hundreds of years, these stories were kept secret in monasteries, away from the public eye. This meant that Western civilization only had a partial understanding of creation and the human soul. Ethiopian monks and scholars knew what was at stake. The manuscripts tell the story of how people tried to protect these works even when foreign armies invaded, empires fell apart, and reformers called for uniformity. People often hid, buried, or copied whole scrolls in secret, and they were often passed down from one generation to the next through careful teaching. Each act of preservation was a recognition of how important these texts were, not just as religious texts, but also as keys to understanding oneself, moral guidance, and spiritual insight. The story of loss is linked to the story of dedication, which shows that knowledge can live on even when people try very hard to erase it. The lost chapters give the story a movie-like quality by adding a sense of mystery and revelation. Readers are encouraged to envision the possibilities: Adam's engagements with angels, the envy of divine entities, the councils prior to creation, and the universal duties entrusted to humanity. These stories, which were once very popular, could have made people feel awe, respect, and a bigger sense of what people can do. It is impossible to overstate how emotional it is to know that such deep knowledge was either taken away on purpose or just hidden because of historical events. It makes people wonder what else might still be hidden, how much of human history has been seen through the eyes of power, and what truths are waiting to be found in Ethiopia's preserved manuscripts. These chapters mean more than just missing text in the end. They tell a different story about how the world was made, how people will end up, and how God interacts with people. This makes us question what we think we know about where we came from. They link Adam's story to the ongoing journey of humanity, showing how lost memory, hidden knowledge, and the never-ending search for understanding can make people feel. The mystery of the erased chapters is still interesting, and it encourages modern readers to look into, question, and interact with the surviving Ethiopian texts and to get back pieces of a story that was almost lost to time. Before Adam ever set foot on the ground in Eden, before the rivers and mountains looked the way they do now, he was a being of light, consciousness, and divine essence. The Ethiopian texts show him as more than just flesh. They say he was a firstborn soul, bright, aware, and chosen for a purpose that went beyond time and space. His pre-creation identity was not just a part of a story, it was a reflection of a universal truth, that every person has a spark of the divine inside them, a link to something much bigger than the physical world we live in. This idea goes against the modern idea of identity by reminding us that life is not just about what we have, but also about what is at the core of who we are. The symbolism of Adam's existence before creation relates to the ideas of origin, purpose, and potential. To comprehend Adam prior to his entrance into the garden is to perceive the archetype of human potential, the intrinsic ability for consciousness, ethical discernment, and spiritual resonance. It serves as a reminder that everyone is part of a bigger story that is deeply connected to the universe and God's plan. The Ethiopian manuscripts stress that Adam's journey was not random. It was planned and carried out by powers that mortals cannot comprehend. His light body, his glowing presence, and the attention he got from heavenly beings all point to a deep truth. That identity starts not in the physical world but in the world of purpose, consciousness, and spiritual essence. This spiritual framework encourages contemplation of contemporary human existence. The narrative of Adam's pre-creation self functions as a reflection, encouraging audiences to contemplate the multifaceted aspects of identity that transcend the physical. Like Adam, who was first a soul of awareness, humans also have hidden abilities, potentials, and connections that we often don't notice in our daily lives. Work, daily life, and what society expects of us can make these deeper truths hard to see, but they are still there for those who take the time to look inside themselves. Adam's example shows that to really know yourself, you need to think about more than just the things you can see and touch. It is a call to see the eternal part of each person, which is the light that comes before and after the body. The story of Adam before creation has a lot of meaning and depth when it comes to feelings. Think about how amazing and heavy it would be to know that your fate stretches over thousands of years and to see events unfold from a point of view that is not limited by time. This point of view makes people feel both awe and humility, and it makes them think about their own lives. Every choice, every act of love, bravery, or morality has effects that go far beyond the present moment and spread through the world in ways that are not always clear. Adam's identity before creation is a metaphor for human potential. It shows that there is a deep heritage of consciousness and purpose waiting to be recognized beneath the surface of everyday life. The manuscripts also show how this spiritual identity is connected to other people. Adam was not alone in his awareness. Angels watched him. He took part in cosmic councils, and he was part of a divine plan that linked his fate to the story of creation as it unfolded. This relational aspect also pertains to the human experience. Identity is not created in solitude but through interconnectedness, with others, with the world, and with the divine. Just as heavenly beings recognized and interacted with Adam's essence before he was created, human potential flourishes when it is cultivated through relationships, a shared purpose, and an understanding of a larger plan. The Ethiopian texts urge readers to perceive life as an unbroken chain of connections, wherein spiritual identity engages with earthly existence in significant, transformative manners. Adam's story makes us think about free will, choice, and how fate unfolds. He first existed as a bright soul, but later he was put in the real world, where he had to deal with problems, temptations, and responsibilities. This change shows the conflict between potential and realization, between knowing who you are and acting on it in the real world. Humanity undergoes a comparable process. The acknowledgement of inner illumination constitutes merely the initial phase. The path entails traversing life's intricacies, acquiring knowledge, evolving, and implementing spiritual consciousness in tangible manners. The pre-creation identity serves as both a source of inspiration and a guiding principle, indicating that awareness of one's deeper self can clarify decisions, enhance resilience, and promote moral clarity. By linking Adam's story to the present day, viewers are urged to think about their own essence before they were created. This is not meant to be taken literally, but rather as a metaphor for the traits that give human life meaning. The ability to be wise, compassionate, creative, and loving can be seen as signs of that original divine spark. These traits stay the same even when they are hidden by everyday problems or social pressures. They are just waiting to be noticed and developed. In this way, the story works as both an allegory and a practical guide, giving us a way to see human potential, moral duty, and spiritual depth. It reminds people that who they are at their core is more important than their situation, environment, or limitations. Adam's pre-creation identity is also empathetic because it is emotional and reflective. We can better understand our own problems, confusions, and desires by thinking about a being who was aware of them before they entered the limits of the physical world. The story talks about how hard it is to go through a change, how hard it is to be a higher self in a physical world, and how everyone has to remember and realize who they really are. In this way, Adam is both a mirror and a guide, showing the tension between who we are by nature and who we become through our experiences. In the end, the spiritual meaning of Adam's identity before he was created is an invitation. It encourages people to see themselves as more than just physical beings, more than the sum of their visible traits and the things that happen to them. It promotes a contemplative inquiry into purpose, a profound connection to the divine, and the comprehension that identity originates in the eternal and is expressed in the temporal. The Ethiopian texts keep this truth alive for hundreds of years. They tell a story that goes beyond cultural and historical boundaries and speaks to anyone who wants to understand what it means to be human. When people think about Adam's bright, pre-creation self, they are encouraged to wake up to their own potential, see the sacred within themselves, and carry on a sense of purpose that connects the eternal and the earthly. As the story of Adam's journey before creation unfolds, one can't help but step back and see the whole picture of humanity's forgotten beginning, a tapestry woven long before the world as we know it existed. The Ethiopian text's heavenly counsels, radiant light body, cosmic responsibilities, and even the jealous watchers all come together to make a story that is both amazing and very human. It tells us not only where we came from, but also who we were meant to be and, in many ways, still are at the core of who we are. To rediscover Adam's original essence means to rediscover who we are and to realize that life is not just a series of events, but a continuation of a divine plan that spans time and space. The Ethiopian manuscript's layers of mystery give this journey weight and depth. Before God made him, Adam was more than just a character in a story. He was the embodiment of potential, the first consciousness aware of divine purpose, and the first reflection of a human soul meant to carry the spark of God into the physical world. He was both hope and the inevitability of human limitation as he descended into Eden, leaving behind the brilliance of the heavenly realm. This duality, both spiritual and emotional, reflects the human condition, a constant struggle between the light of our inherent potential and the harshness of life on earth. As Adam moves from eternity to time, viewers are invited to think about their own journey and how every person has a bit of that original light in them, even when circumstances, fear, or distraction hide it. Finding this beginning again is also a way to honor the hard work, sacrifices, and bravery of the people who kept the story alive. Ethiopian monks, scribes, and keepers of knowledge put their lives on the line to make sure the hidden chapters of history would survive the destructive waves of time. Wars, conquests, theological reforms, and cultural shifts threatened to erase these accounts completely. However, their preservation lets us see a side of humanity that Western canons don't fully capture. This link between the past and the present makes us think deeply. Our ideas about life, morality, and purpose have been shaped by more than just what we have been told. They have also been shaped by what has been hidden, taken away, or lost over the years. Revisiting Adam's story is a figurative way of getting back wisdom and closing the gap in time between what we used to know and what we can learn today. The story has a lot of emotional depth. Adam's awareness prior to physical existence, his interactions with angels, the jealousy and rebellion of the Watchers, and his eventual descent into Eden evoke a sense of wonder, melancholy, and profound introspection. Adam's journey reflects humanity's yearning, confusion, and quest for meaning, indicating that these issues are not contemporary but rather perennial experiences. The Ethiopian texts, with their depth and detail, remind us that the human soul is old and that the problems we face now are part of a much bigger story that is still going on. Within each individual resides a manifestation of that primordial consciousness, serving as a reminder that, despite forgetfulness, distraction, or adversity, there exists an intrinsic essence of illumination and intent that can steer choices, stimulate development, and cultivate comprehension. Adam's journey has a symbolic meaning that goes beyond identity, responsibility, and potential. Before creation, Adam was both an observer and a participant in a cosmic story. On Earth, he became the model for human experience, holding within him the seeds of morality, choice, and spiritual awareness. When people see Adam as the model for creation itself, they can look at their own lives in a new way, seeing them as connected, meaningful, and spiritually important. It asks the audience to picture that human life is not just a response to events, but a planned part of a larger cosmic pattern that has been developing since the first soul came into being. The consequences are both humbling and empowering. We are heirs to an ancient consciousness while simultaneously being active participants in its continuous manifestation. Thinking about this story also makes you think about the relationship between God and people. The Ethiopian manuscripts stress that heavenly beings saw and recognized Adam before he was created, that he was aware of things beyond the physical world, and that his choices would have an impact on future generations. This framing implies that every human existence possesses significance, that our actions have far-reaching consequences, and that spiritual awareness is both transmitted and developed. By reconnecting with Adam's journey, viewers are reminded that they are not alone and that their story is part of a bigger cosmic order. This point of view can help you find meaning, guidance, and hope even when you're not sure, having trouble, or not perfect. The emotional impact of this story becomes clear as the documentary comes to an end. This is not just a story about Adam or old books. It is also a call to remember what has been forgotten, to see the divine spark within, and to accept a broader view of human potential. The preserved Ethiopian texts, the missing chapters, and the hidden wisdom of centuries give us a glimpse into what it means to be fully human, to be more than just a body, a situation, or a past, and to exist as a soul that can think, choose, and connect with the divine. The path from heavenly light to earthly flesh and finally to human experience is like the path that each person takes in their own life, whether they know it or not. In conclusion, while the world often focuses on the physical, measurable, and visible parts of life, the story of Adam reminds us that there is a deeper level to life, one that comes before material reality, one that gives human consciousness meaning, and one that urges us to think, wake up, and use our full potential. Rediscovering humanity's forgotten beginning is not just a historical or spiritual exercise. It is a personal and collective revelation that reminds us that our essence is eternal, our choices matter, and our lives are part of a cosmic story that started long before time itself. It is a call to remember, honor, and live in awareness of the bright legacy that Adam left behind. This legacy still lives on in every human soul today. The idea sounds impossible at first glance, almost like a riddle whispered through ages. What if Adam existed before the world was created? The question alone shakes the ground beneath everything we assume about beginnings. Most people imagine Adam only as the first man molded from dust, standing in a newborn garden. But what if that is only the surface of a much older story? What if his presence didn't begin on earth at all? What if his first breath wasn't taken in Eden's soil, but in a realm existing before light touched the universe? The very thought cracks open a door that most traditions have kept shut for centuries. Yet Ethiopia's ancient manuscripts sit quietly, carrying secrets that dare to cross that threshold. And when you hear this possibility, something stirs inside you, not fear, but a strange familiarity. A sense that you've always felt incomplete, like a fragment of something bigger. A feeling that life started long before your birth certificate ever said it did. Modern life has a way of silencing that inner ache with noise, goals, endless distractions. But every now and then, the question slips through the cracks. Why do I feel lost? Why do I feel like I'm searching for something I can't name? Maybe the ache is older than you think. Maybe humanity's sense of disconnection is not a psychological glitch, but a memory buried under thousands of years of forgetting. A memory tied to the very origins of the first human spirit. Ethiopia's ancient writings do something bold. They pull back the curtain. They describe Adam not as a simple being formed in a garden, but as a soul created long before the physical earth was shaped. They speak of a record written in heaven, a blueprint of humanity drafted before dust existed. Imagine that for a moment. A story where human identity didn't begin with a breath in Eden, but with a purpose written before creation itself. These texts paint Adam as more than a figure of clay. They reveal a being whose story begins in a place untouched by time. A being who watched what was coming, who carried a destiny carved into his spirit long before rivers flowed or stars burned. Most people have never heard this version of the story because these ancient pages stayed hidden, protected by monks who guarded them with devotion, preserved in monasteries untouched by Western edits, untouched by political rewriting, untouched by the pressure to simplify the universe into neat, small boxes. These manuscripts weren't lost. They were shielded. Shielded from people who weren't ready to accept that the human story didn't start with soil, but with a divine calling scripted before matter appeared. That's why so many traditions skipped these details. They were too powerful, too expansive, too challenging to the usual timelines people were used to hearing. But think about it. If Adam had a story before Eden, then humanity has a story before Earth. And that explains so much. Why humans feel like strangers to their own world. Why we long for meaning that nothing here can satisfy. Why suffering feels like a detour instead of a destination. Deep down, most people feel like they've been dropped into a life they were never fully prepared for. Like they used to know something important but somehow forgot it along the way. Ethiopian writings echo that feeling. They suggest humanity was meant for something greater than the cycle of birth, struggle, and death. They describe a pre-creation realm where identity was designed, purpose was written, and destiny was shaped. If Adam's spirit existed before creation, then the story of humanity isn't about trying to become something. It's about remembering something. Remembering who you were before the world taught you who to be. And that idea changes everything. It flips the entire concept of purpose, faith, and human struggle upside down. It means you weren't created by accident. You weren't born without intention. You weren't placed in this world to wander without direction. If the blueprint existed before the universe, then your life has meaning woven into it from the beginning. Not a single moment of your existence is random. You're following a path written long before the sun lit up the sky. But why would such knowledge be hidden? Why would early scribes preserve this story while later traditions left it out? Because this version of the story gives humanity a sense of power, an ancient identity. It shifts the balance from humans being mere creations to humans being part of a divine plan that stretches beyond time. That kind of knowledge cannot be controlled. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be weaponized. So it was easier for later storytellers to keep Adam's story simple: a garden, a tree, a beginning. Yet Ethiopia's ancient manuscripts refused to shrink the truth. They held onto the fullness of the story, guarding it for a time when people were ready to ask harder questions. And that's the moment we're in now. More people than ever are searching for meaning, questioning everything, sensing that something important is missing. People feel the tension in their hearts, the gap between their daily lives and the spiritual depth they know must exist somewhere. When you hear that Adam's existence began before Earth, something inside you recognizes it, not as new information, but as something you always sensed but never had the words for. It's like remembering a dream you thought you'd forgotten. A feeling that this story is not just history, it's your story, your origin, your missing chapter. So as you sit with this mystery, let it open your imagination. Let it remind you that your spirit is older than your struggles, older than your pain, older than your confusion, older than everything this world has thrown at you. The story we're about to explore doesn't just explain Adam, it explains you. And once you see the beginning clearly, the rest of your life suddenly looks different. Before we continue deeper into this ancient journey, I want to say something directly to you. You're not just a viewer, you're someone special who shows up for knowledge that most people never explore. Your support helps me reach 10,000 subscribers, which allows me to keep bringing these hidden truths to light. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Tell me your name, your city, and the time you're watching this video. I read every comment. And if you want to support the channel further, you can do it through Super Thanks. I've also placed the links for the complete 88 books Ethiopian Bible and the Book of Enoch in the description below, so you can explore these forgotten texts for yourself. Ethiopia had secrets that went far beyond the pages of the Bible that we know today, long before the Western world knew about it. In the highlands, hidden by mountains and time itself, devoted monks did a holy duty that would keep knowledge alive. These men lived in monasteries on cliffs and in hidden valleys. They knew that what they were protecting wasn't just a bunch of words on parchment. It was a map to the spiritual and cosmic past of all of humanity. They put their lives on the line for manuscripts that most people thought were heretical or against the law. These texts were in danger when empires rose and fell and conquerors tried to force their own versions of faith on others. Fires, invasions, and the unending passage of time all threatened to wipe them out completely, but they survived thanks to the monks' unwavering devotion to their true worth. The Ethiopian canon had between 81 and 88 books, depending on which manuscript you looked at. It was bigger than the Western Bible. Ethiopia kept texts that talked about people and events that the rest of the world had forgotten, unlike the Western canon. 1 Enoch and Jubilees are two books that were very well known in early Christian and Jewish traditions. They lived on here long after they were lost in other places. Some texts talked about wars in space, angels coming down, and giants walking on Earth. Others gave us new information about creation, pre-human history, and the secret plans of the heavens. For hundreds of years, these manuscripts were more than holy. They were a record of a world that no one else could see, stories that linked people to their earliest spiritual roots. Think about what these monks do every day. They got up before the sun and chanted prayers that echoed off stone walls. Their days were mostly quiet. They worked hard on fragile scrolls and codices, copying every letter by hand, sometimes from texts that were already hundreds of years old. Every stroke of ink was a sign of devotion and an attempt to keep knowledge alive for future generations. But danger was always close by. Changes in politics, hostile leaders, or invaders could come at any time and destroy everything. Some monks hid with whole libraries on their backs or in secret cave systems. Their lives were simple, but their mission was very important: to keep truths that were too dangerous or too strange for the outside world alive. The fact that these texts have survived is amazing, not only because of the dedication of the people who wrote them, but also because of the historical strength they show. Monastic libraries burned down, and droughts, famines, and political unrest made monasteries easy targets. But the texts lived on, passed down from one group of monks to the next. Some were buried in secret rooms and found again hundreds of years later. Others were taken to faraway monasteries on cliffs that could only be reached by ladders or ropes. It was as if the geography itself was trying to keep these secrets safe from people who wanted to know them. Each manuscript, worn and fragile, has the echoes of many hands that traced its letters. These hands knew that erasing the letters would mean losing truths that are beyond human understanding. The way these manuscripts were treated also shows a deep spiritual side. Not only were they historical records, but they were also holy companions to the monks' prayers. Each page was filled with devotion, and each symbol had a meaning. During rituals, the texts were read out loud, whispered in private, or thought about alone. People thought that understanding them would connect the reader to God and to the very fabric of the universe, to things that happened before people were created as we know them. Adam was more than just the first man in these scripts. He was a person whose life and actions had an effect on places that people couldn't see, and whose story was connected to places that people couldn't see. Why did Ethiopia keep these stories when the rest of the world didn't? Maybe it was the highlands' geographic isolation, the dedication of monastic communities, or a unique view of faith that saw value in every whisper of divine history. No matter what the reason, the result is amazing: a living archive of the oldest biblical universe, quietly waiting to reveal its truths. This preservation goes against what most people think about history and faith today. It posits that a significant portion of what is regarded as canonical or universal in Western Christianity constitutes merely a fragment of a more extensive and intricate spiritual narrative. But these manuscripts didn't survive just because of luck or where they were found. People's bravery, sacrifice, and watchfulness kept them alive. Every monk who put their life on the line to protect a scroll, every scribe who carefully copied a text, and every community that kept knowledge secret helped keep a universe alive that most people will never see. They were devoted not for their own glory, but to protect something much bigger than themselves. This preservation has a very strong emotional effect. When you hold an Ethiopian manuscript, You can feel the weight of centuries pressing down on your fingers. The faint smell of ink and old paper carries whispers of devotion long ago, and every line is proof that you can survive against all odds. Wars, natural disasters, and people's desire for power tried to silence these stories, but they still live on. By doing this, they give us a glimpse not only into ancient knowledge, but also into the minds and hearts of the people who worked hard to protect it. The Ethiopian manuscripts remind us that some truths are worth protecting at all costs in a world where information is often short-lived and easy to lose. They want us to think about how fragile knowledge is, how important it is to protect it, and how dedicated the people who saw value in stories that the rest of the world forgot were. They talk about a time when faith, bravery, and hard work kept the hidden threads of history alive. These threads may hold the answers to questions we've only just begun to ask. The mystery of who protects Ethiopia goes beyond history. It is very human. It makes people think about how far they would go to protect what they thought was sacred. As we think about these monks, their sacrifices, and the manuscripts that survived, we start to see why Ethiopia became the keeper of the oldest biblical universe. The heavens themselves kept a record, a cosmic ledger, of what was to come long before the first sunrise touched the mountains of Ethiopia or any other part of the world. These weren't just regular writings or records of people's lives. They were the heavenly tablets, written with divine accuracy and detailing the fates of every being the Creator planned to create. One of these names stood out. It glowed faintly with a light that was brighter than the stars themselves: Adam. His name, carved in gold on translucent celestial stone, shone as if it knew how important it was, a sign of a life that had not yet been lived and a story that had not yet been told. Picture this. The sky is huge and endless, and the air is full of light that has no source and goes on forever. Angels of all shapes and sizes floated silently, their wings making waves of bright energy that spread through the sky. They leaned in closer to the tablets, their eyes wide with interest. Some whispered in musical tones, while others shook with amazement. They could still feel the weight of what they read, even though they were in the presence of God. This was a being like no other. The choices they made would have effects on all of creation, and their life would shape the course of human history. The Book of Jubilees doesn't just call these tablets writings. It calls them living records that are full of the energy of destiny. Every word written on them had a purpose, and every stroke was a planned act of divine foresight. People didn't just write down Adam's name. They celebrated it, thought about it, and talked about it. Some angels were very excited about the coming of humanity and the new order it would bring. Some people hesitated because they knew how fragile life is and that even with a perfect plan, free will could change history in ways no one could have predicted. This mix of awe and caution created a silent sense of anticipation that spread across the sky. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath at this moment before creation. Around the tablets, rivers of light, constellations that would one day be seen in the sky by people, and swirling clouds of cosmic dust moved in a silent ballet. Angels got closer, their wings brushing against each other as they shared thoughts and whispers that were older than time but still alive in that moment. They talked about and were amazed by the fate of a human who had not yet been born. They wondered how Adam, the first of his kind, would get around in a world that did not yet exist. Would he keep the promises written on these holy stones? Could he handle the tests that were predicted even before he was born? The emotional tension in heaven was clear. Some angels doubted the Creator's plan and whispered in fear and